That's right, I'm playing Super Mario Sunshine, originally released for the Nintendo GameCube on my iPad Pro. This is not a scam, there's no tricks. This is being natively emulated without a jailbreak. It has been upscaled to 1080p 60. It looks gorgeous. Oh, and I can play all the games using an Xbox or PlayStation controller. Oh yeah, Wii games? Those work too. This is freaking awesome, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. Okay, let's get down to brass tacks. To do this, you're gonna need a few things. Number one, a Mac or PC. Number two, an iOS device with an A9 processor or newer. So that means iPhone 6s/iPad 5th generation or later. Number three, said device must be running iOS 13.4.1 or older. The upcoming 13.5 update will break this exploit, so don't update if you want to keep on gaming. Now, new exploits may be available in the future, but there's no telling when that will be, so 13.4.1 or earlier. And last, number four, you're going to need backups of Wii games that you physically own and can legally emulate. I'll link a guide down below on how to do that. Or for those of you that don't live on Earth and are not subject to laws, might be able to find some Wii/GameCube ROMs on popular torrent sites easily, but I wouldn't know. To sideload this awesome emulator for iOS, we need to install the open source Alt Store on our device. Now, Alt Store allows you to install and manage apps acquired by third-party sources. In order to install Alt Store, we need to get our computers ready. So let's start with macOS. First, download Alt Server from the link below. You must copy the Alt Server app file into the inside of the applications folder, otherwise it won't have the necessary permissions to do everything it needs to do. Then, launch the Alt Server app and you'll find it up here at the top of your menu bar. Once you've done that, connect your iPad or your iPhone or your iOS device to your computer, and if you're on Catalina, open up the Finder window and you should see your device. If you're running Mojave or earlier, open up iTunes like you're used to. Now, if like me, you didn't see your device by default, open Finder Preferences and enable CDs, DVDs, and iOS devices in the sidebar, and your device should appear. From here, make sure you click Trust Device on both your Mac and your iOS device if it prompts you to do so. Then, click Show this iPhone when on Wi-Fi. That will allow Alt Server to communicate with our iPad over the wireless network. Once that's been done, click Alt Server up in your menu bar and click Install Alt Store. And well, you're almost done, but not quite. Now you're going to need your Apple ID and password. But why? Well, Apple allows developers to install apps that they've quote unquote built or compiled themselves onto their own devices for testing. And so we're going to send our Apple ID and password to Apple to get an install certificate so we can put third-party apps on our device. Alt Store never sees these credentials, and their app is open source, so you can check the code for yourself. But if you're still a little bit wary and you don't want to use your real Apple ID, you can create a burner Apple ID account and use that instead. Even if you're not logged into that account on your iOS device or Mac, it works fine, which is great. After we do that, Alt Server will prompt us to install the Mail plugin. Now, this is only necessary on macOS, but it is required to spoof app signing. So quit the Mail app if it's running in the background and enter your password to grant Alt Server permission to install the plugin. If that dialog box went away, you can also find it in the Alt Server menu by clicking Install Mail plugin. Then open Mail, Preferences, Manage Plugins, and enable altplugin.mail bundle. Click Apply and restart Mail. Now, with Mail open, go to Alt Server and install Alt Store, select your device, and finally, you are done. On Windows, it's quite a bit easier. Download the latest version of iTunes and iCloud directly from Apple, not from the Microsoft Store. And then download Alt Server for Windows using the link below. Extract the .zip archive that Alt Server downloads in, and click the setup.exe installer and follow the basic installation instruction. You guys know how to do that. After that, you'll be able to find Alt Server as an icon in the notification area and just launch it. Plug in your iOS device, open iTunes, click Trust on your PC and iOS device if prompted, and then enable iTunes Wi-Fi sync. Once that's done, click the Alt Server icon and click Install Alt Store. And then you just choose your device. Now, like on macOS, you are going to need to insert your Apple ID and password. But why? Well, Apple allows developers to install apps they've quote-unquote built themselves onto their devices for testing. And so we're going to send our Apple ID and password to Apple to let that happen. Now, AltStore never sees these credentials. They go straight to Apple, and their app is open source, so you can check the code for yourself. But if you're still a little bit wary, as I was, you can create a burner Apple ID account and just use that, even if you're not logged into your Windows computer or your iOS device with that fake Apple ID. Okay, the hard part is done. AltStore is installed. Now, if you had troubles doing this, I will link to their very helpful FAQ down below. But once that's done, we're going to need to install the actual emulator, DolphiniOS, which is based off of the famous open source PC emulator. To do that, you're going to need to download the .ipa file, which I have linked down below. And you're going to need to download it directly to your iOS device, which means opening the link in Safari and then saving it somewhere on your iPhone or iPad's file system using the Files app. After that, open AltStore, click My Apps, and then tap the plus button. And then just navigate to the dolphin.ipa file you just downloaded and install. Now, AirServer must be running on your Mac or your PC. And on the Mac, you must also have the Mail app open and running. But with that, you should be able to install it. You might note something a little strange, that 7 days button next to your apps that you've installed. What does that mean? Well, Apple requires that the certificate you use to sign this app with your Apple ID be re-signed every week if you don't pay for the $99 per year Apple developer account. Now, AltStore will attempt to do this in the background automatically as long as AirServer and AltStore are running, but you can also click the button manually to re-sign apps. Just make sure you do it within 7 days. If you do pay for a developer account through Apple, you don't need to worry about this, but their system isn't too bad either. All right, with Dolphin installed, it is time to get gaming. Almost. Either sync or download your game backups or ROMs to the Files app, and then once that's done, you can click the plus button inside of DolphiniOS, select the ROM, and that's it. It'll run. That said, there are a few optimizations that I've been able to make that I think makes the experience much better, and so I will share them. First off, the touch controls work fine for GameCube, but I think playing with a real controller is way better. And luckily, iOS now supports not only MFI controllers, but any Bluetooth-enabled Xbox One or PS4 controller. So to sync that to your iPad or your iPhone, hold the pairing button on your specific controller, then navigate to the Bluetooth settings in iOS, select the controller, and you're paired. Then, within Dolphin, go to Settings, GameCube, Port 1, which means Controller 1, Device, and then change from the touchscreen controller to the MFI controller. Now, I also chose to change the button layout because the default button layout mimics Xbox rather than Nintendo's layout, which when playing Nintendo's games, I think you should use that layout, but that's really up to you. Wii games also work, but unfortunately, the default iOS Bluetooth stack does not sync to the Wii remote. Now, if you're jailbroken, you can get around this really easily with a simple to install tweak, but for us non-jailbroken schmucks, we are sadly stuck to using touch controls. I even tried Dolphin Bar, which is a very popular way to emulate kind of Wii remote functionality on a PC. I plugged my Dolphin Bar into the iPad's USB port, and while the Wii remote did sync to the Dolphin Bar itself, no information was actually passed through to my iPad. Bummer. There are, however, a number of Wii titles like Xenoblade Chronicles, Super Smash Bros., and Mario Kart that support a classic controller layout, and we can use our Xbox controller to simulate that in Dolphin for iOS. So navigate to Wii Remote, then click Configure, and then change the extension from Nunchuck to Classic Controller. This means that our emulator buttons will go away. However, you can set up multiple profiles if you plan on emulating Wii with frequency. At first, I found the games to look quite poor on my iPad, and that's because it chooses to emulate them in the default resolution, native resolution. But Apple's SoCs are so powerful that I actually found that you can upscale them quite nicely without really any loss in performance. And the quality looks significantly sharper with higher texture details. Navigate to Settings, Enhancements, Internal Resolution, and then click your resolution. Now, how much you can upscale really depends on the power of your chip inside your Apple device and the necessity. For example, on an iPhone, 720p I found to be more than sufficient, but on my iPad I was able to scale up to 1080p with no problem whatsoever. It's really amazing how good games like Xenoblade Chronicles look upscaled on a beautiful modern iPad. It makes me sad and hopeful that better games come to iOS in the future. But I found basically no input lag, and it doesn't feel like an emulator at all, which is really, really good. Performance is shockingly excellent. So give DolphiniOS and Alt Store a try today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, well, that other button seems to work okay too. Get subscribed for more awesome tech videos like this one, but most importantly, stay safe, stay home, and as always, stay snazzy.